What is going on YouTube? This is Jim back with another impressions video. Today taking a look at Outriders. Now this game borrows heavily off of Gears of War, The Division, and Destiny. It takes its own spin on a post-apocalyptic universe in which you play as a person who is trying your best to make everything better. Before I get into today's review, I have a simple request for you. That's right, I would love for you guys to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for the support. I played this game for a couple hours yesterday. There is a demo available pretty much on every major platform. You're looking at the PC variant. And what's going to happen in this demo is you're going to get a lot of cutscenes and a lot of story, and then towards the end is when you finally start to get into the gameplay. And I feel like if that is synonymous with how the game is ultimately going to turn out, it's going to have a pretty in-depth, fully voice-narrated story with a lot of RPG elements in which decisions you make and conversations you have with NPCs around you will absolutely shape the universe. And I think that's something that's really missing from games like The Division and from Destiny, where they're more linear in nature in the sense that there's a very specific path you're going to take. You're going to unlock certain people that are going to unlock different crafting stations or different abilities, that sort of thing. I'm hoping, and we'll have to see, I'm hoping this has more of an RPG element to it. I think that's what may keep people more interested in it, because I got to be honest, in the time I played with it, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. It seemed very unpolished, and it seemed that there was still a lot of issues they needed to work out. Now, the combat is fun. It's cover-based combat, which you're about to see here. You're going to select what powers you want to have, and that's where the Destiny element comes in. You're going to have these supernatural oh crap buttons. You're going to have 3 of them that allow you to do miraculous things, whether shoot an energy wave or turn into, you know, a rock structure or different things like that. Those are the ones you're going to see me playing with in this particular playthrough. These are supposed to turn the tide of war, but these are not your primary offensive tools. You're going to still be relying primarily on gun and cover combat, very similar to Destiny, really any of those games I mentioned, Gears, Destiny, The Division, where, you know, you're working as a team, trying to flank enemies, you know, and advance in a very linear nature in that sense. These are giant, I don't want to say sandbox levels. There's a very definite area where you can explore, very corridor-based shooters that have little nooks and crannies. Sometimes you'll find the occasional chest with a piece of gear or whatever, but most of the combat requires you to completely liquidate all the enemies around you before you advance. So you're going to get very familiar with these small little battlegrounds. You're going to basically be chasing red dots on your radar. That's how it's basically going to work out. Now, I assume at harder difficulties, which this game does support, by the way, very similar to Diablo, where you can set your, what they call like your world tier, which is basically like how easy or hard is the enemies around you. The higher the level, the harder the enemies are, but the better the loot. So there's a little risk and reward there. But in these basic levels, as they're teaching you how to play, you're basically going to be invulnerable. You're just going to run face first into combat, shoot, and proceed. The reason I kind of dump on the game a little bit is it's just not really that polished. There's a lot of things in it that really just could be better. And I do question with a lot of these games, especially when I realize this was a day one Game Pass game. I really start to question, you know, are we going to be swimming in the sea of sevens? In other words, this is going to be another 7 out of 10 game that's not bad but not good, just kind of in the middle. And that's kind of where I feel about it right now. It doesn't do anything that, like, made me jones in the pre-order or, you know, tell all my friends, hey, you guys got to jump on this. I played it by myself for a couple hours, and I feel like I understand it. I got my fill. I've already uninstalled it. It didn't wow me and woo me like, oh, I got to keep playing with other games like The Division 2 that just keeps bringing me back over and over and over again. The reason I say that is you're going to notice a lot of goofy things. Character animations don't always seem very fluid. When you're shooting an enemy, for example, when they die, they have a preset animation on how they die. So sometimes an enemy's head will explode while you're shooting them in the ankle. Or sometimes you'll be shooting an enemy in the head and their body will explode. It's basically like they have this algorithm of like, okay, here's the possible animations that will occur when an enemy dies. And they just randomly pick one, and that's what you end up getting. And it doesn't always really seem like it matches the action. Speaking of action, you're going to have a lot of it, and the cover-based system, like I said, works pretty well, but you're going to be dealing with waves and waves of relatively mindless bullet sponge enemies that just walk straight into you. I didn't really feel like I was being flanked. I didn't really feel like the enemy AI was doing anything other than walking directly into me. And in many instances, and I believe you'll see it here at the end of this little area that I'm exploring, enemies oftentimes get caught in structures and are walking into walls and walking into corners, and it's a chore to go back and clean them up rather than like, oh my god, thank god we survived this ruthless onslaught. The enemies themselves don't necessarily make sense either of like what they're doing here. You know, you're in a post-apocalyptic world twice over, where it seems like factions are you know, huddling together to scavenge for the few precious resources left on this really weird planet that you landed on. But the way that they're fighting and how they're fighting and what they're fighting for just seems very forced, and it doesn't really feel like these guys so much are enemies. As a matter of fact, in the opening area, you land, and within 5 minutes, you're already you kill the leader of this expeditionary force, who supposedly turns on you by killing some other person. The combat doesn't seem warranted to the story. And I really hope they can't fix that now, but I hope it makes more sense as you kind of flesh out the game. That's where I really lean on those RPG elements, and I hope that there is a much more narrative story here to kind of tie that together, because honestly, the action's a little jarring. It doesn't really fit with what's going on. You're just kind of like a murder machine because game said so. It doesn't really feel like it makes a whole lot of sense. Outside of, you know, some of those things, the other polishing issues, cutscenes don't seem to match up with the action. Your character will change the way they look. They'll change the gear they're holding. They'll change the equipment they're wearing. It fades to black far too often. Lots of loading screens between these small, seemingly should have been in-game cutscenes. They force you to another pre-rendered cutscene to watch something that only takes a second or two. The tooltips on the loading screen seem to be stagnant. It just keeps reminding you to do the same first level over and over, even after you've been playing for hours. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I've done a jump cut here to a little bit later in the story. You will find that there's this base that you can walk around and explore, and that's where I really start to find this game interesting. With those RPG elements, you can walk around, you can take on quests from various vendors, this crafting system, you're going to start understanding materials you need to pick up, how to upgrade your weapons, there's legendary weapons, different kinds of guns, powers. That's that RPG element that I think everybody wanted. And you start to see that there. But ultimately, like I said, it does devolve back into basic cover corridor shooting. That is the soul of this game. And combat does feel good. It feels responsive. You're going to have a couple different weapons to select through. You obviously have your powers. And depending on what ability you took at the beginning will greatly influence how you play. I chose to primarily play through this playthrough I'm recording here. This is the second time I actually played through the game with a tank. Nice thing about a tank is any damage that any enemies that they kill around them, they regenerate health. So this play style is going to reward you by being very offensive minded. So instead of being like hiding in the back with a sniper rifle, this rewards you for being aggressive. And not all play styles match this particular set of loadout. And I like that. So I feel like there is going to be diversity, particularly playing with your friends. You may have people who tend to want to stand in the back, a little more defensive based. This class obviously much more offensive based. And I think you're going to get a nice mix of putting together a pretty good team. Obviously, just like with the Division, or really even with Gears of War for that matter, playing with others is going to be phenomenal, particularly for the cover and flanking system, where you're going to be able to manipulate enemy AI in such a way that you're setting up really nice crossfire lanes and flanking the enemy and taking turns on aggro, essentially, to clear some of the more complex areas. And in the beginning part of this game, like I said, it's more of a tutorial area. The enemies don't really get that hard, but you can dial them up with that world tier that I had mentioned, and you will get better rewards. Some of the better stuff is locked behind those harder world tiers, so it's an incentive for you to get smarter. One of the other things that I like about this game, and this is a really smart idea, I'm glad they chose this route, is you're going to have a lot of drop-in, drop-out multiplayer, because you're going to be able to go on different missions with friends. And at any time, there's basically this world time meter. So if you're playing and you're really enjoying your RPG element and you're 20 hours into the game and your buddy finally picks up the game and you want to jump back and play with them, no problem. You could jump back in time to any point in the story, replay any mission, but you still keep your guns, your gear, and you still work towards your progress, which is a really, really cool idea. Haven't gotten a chance to test that yet. None of my friends were on when I was dorking around with this late last night. I suspect there will probably be some normalization of how you do damage. A lot of games have figured this formula out, so I'm not too worried about that. But essentially, everybody will be scaled to where they need to be. You're not going to be carrying people. You're not going to feel like you're underpowered. Everybody's going to be right where they need to be. That's the best way to do this. But the ability for you to jump in and see different parts of the world is good. Now, where this game may suffer, and we'll have to wait and see how it evolves, is depending on how your specific world is shaped. Will be interesting to see if that really does matter, if that RPG element really does take precedence over playing with your friends. And the reason I say that is what you may end up seeing is your world looks very different than mine. I may have different quests or NPCs in my universe than yours. So I don't know if the hub world's going to be 100% instanced or if they're going to do some sort of hybrid thing. That remains to be seen. But on the surface, I think it works. It needs more time and polish. And honestly, every games as a service that has come out in the last 10 years has honestly been the same formula. You know, look at the original Destiny when it came out. It wasn't that great. I mean, it was fun because we never had anything like it. But it wasn't the best thing we ever played. It took time to refine that formula. And the Division, while the first Division was good, you know, I think Division 2 really figured out a lot better formulas. And I suspect this will be the same thing. I think they have a good working idea here. You're going to marry in the supernatural powers with the standard gunplay that we're familiar with, which I enjoy. You're going to have some light RPG elements in there, which I enjoy. And they're going to kind of morph all those things into one. And they're going to say, okay, this is going to be the experience now. I just think it needs a little bit more time. Unfortunately, I think a lot of these cutscenes, the stiff voice acting, we're stuck with those. I don't see them going back and polishing these things up. So if this is the quality of the game they've released, I'm going to firmly stand by. I think this is a 7 in a sea of, you know, we're swimming in the 7s again. This is another Game Pass game that's just okay, and I'm worried about that. I want there to be more polish, more refinement, because this world does interest me, and I want to see where this story evolves and takes us. And I was interested in why did I have powers, and you know, how can I shape the world around me? And it seems like they're onto something. They just need to finish that idea. Leave some comments below. Let me know your thoughts on Outriders if you played it. I want to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.